For more on this topic, I want to welcome on Jason Miller, a communications strategist and former chief spokesman for the 2016 Trump campaign. Jason, we've seen the American people almost rally around the idea of putting blame on China. In fact, polls show that almost 70% of Americans support the idea of being a little bit more critical on China. And that's something as much of a consensus as we see in today's politics. Do you think that that is guiding the Trump administration when it continues to put the blame on the Chinese Communist Party?
Well, I don't know how much of it is putting the blame on. I mean, it's correctly pointing out where this virus came from and how we got to this terrible place with our country. I mean, look, we have, well over 40,000 Americans who have been killed because of this disease. Our economy is in shambles. And you look back at the AP investigative report that shows if the Chinese had taken action a week earlier than they did, if they hadn't hid this, we could have prevented 2/3 of the cases. And if they took action all the way back in December when they knew about this, we could have stopped 95% of the cases. So the fact that 90% of Americans think that the rise of China's power is problematic, and I think it's right now 66% of the country has a more negative viewpoint towards China, that the Chinese can only blame themselves for that.
And it's not only the effects here in the United States. I mean, we can look all over the world and what this coronavirus pandemic has done to countries in Europe, countries in Asia. It's not just here in the United States. So do you think that there's going to be more of a global type of consensus, really putting, once again, the blame on China and hopefully putting some accountability on them once we're past this pandemic?
Yeah, great question, Alex. I think they're going to see some kind of Nuremberg type trial at some point down the road here. I mean, this is ultimately going to be hundreds of thousands of innocent people around the world who will be killed by this disease. I mean, even this morning, there's an article in the South China Morning Post saying that China actual totals of coronavirus cases there could have been 4 times higher. AEI has a study out this week saying they hid to deaths of tens of thousands of people. But the fact that the Chinese could have stopped this if they'd shared the information, if they brought in folks from the West like the U.S., but they didn't. They hid it so they could go and sign the phase 1 trade deal. They hid it so they could go to Davos. This was a woefully complicit action by the Chinese Communist Party as well as the WHO to help cover up for them. And I think ultimately it's going to be a pretty heavy price to pay at some point down the road here.
And you bring up the WHO right there, and I think that's a very interesting point because every lie that we saw from the Chinese Communist Party was essentially parroted by the WHO at some point. The most common ones are human-to-human transmission. We now know that the time when the World Health Organization made that claim that there was no evidence of that, that wasn't true. I mean, even the public health officials should know that, let alone lay people like us. But when it comes to the World Health Organization, is it a similar type of accountability, or do you think that defunding that organization is really the end goal, the thing that the United States can do when it comes to putting accountability on the WHO?
Well, I'm glad that we're not sending any money to the WHO right now. I think we ought to cut off all funding until we get new leadership in there. Tedros has to go. And in fact, yesterday he tweeted out, forgive, just as the one word. I mean, what a slap in the face to the hundreds of thousands of people who have been killed by this, the almost 50,000 Americans. I think we'll hit that number on Saturday. And this is just terrible. But the fact that even going back to January 14th, when China knew exactly what was going on, they knew this was going to be a global pandemic. They knew about the case in Thailand. They knew about the spread there in Wuhan, that the WHO was tweeting out that there was no person-to-person transmission. They've been complicit in this. Tedros has been, he's got to go. No more funding until we get someone new in there. I think Ben Carson, Secretary Ben Carson at HUD, would be a great person to take over the WHO and run it. If they're not going to put in some real accountability, some real solid leadership, then we ought to just dissolve it and have the U.S. help countries directly.
And we've heard that's essentially what China did with Tedros, is they were very much so pushing for him behind the scenes in order to take that position there. He's a former health official, I believe it was in Ethiopia, where he was once again accused of covering up a cholera outbreak there. And now we see what's going on now with coronavirus. So there's certainly a lot of allegations to be made against him. And I think that's a very interesting point about Ben Carson, because if we are giving the WHO this much money, I forgot exactly what the total is, but it's well above anything else that any other country is contributing. Do we have a say in who leads that organization? Like, would President Trump have the right to say, we want Ben Carson in that organization, or else you're not getting this funding at all?
Yeah, we give 2 times more than the next nearest country, which is China. And right now, the only thing the WHO has done is, I think the organization now stands for We Hide Outbreaks. I don't know anything they do for the U.S. They've covered this up. They've led to the deaths of thousands of Americans, let alone hundreds of thousands around the world being willfully complicit in what the Chinese are doing. There's got to be some accountability there before another dollar goes their direction.
You got to copyright that "we hide outbreak" thing. That's pretty good. Someone's going to take that from you if you don't. We've already seen the expression "China lied and people died," very much so gain traction. That's what a lot of people are saying, acknowledging the facts that as they come to light, we're seeing that China was not honest, the WHO was not honest, and as a result, people around the world are dying and people around the world are not going to work. I think that's very well said. Jason Miller, I really appreciate you coming down and breaking down this topic for us. Thank you.